Are you thinking about moving to Placerville, Dorado County, or one of our other Foothills communities, and you're wondering what it costs to actually live here? Are you worried about home prices, gas prices, property taxes, propane, water bills, PG&E, and you don't know what it will cost or who to use? Well, look, I've got you covered. Stick with me. We're gonna get stuck right into the cost of living in Placerville. All right, first up, home prices. Now, if you're thinking about moving here, you're probably thinking about buying a home here. So what does the average home cost in Placerville? Well, right now, as of the making of this video, January 2024, the average cost of a home in Placerville is just above $535,000. So what does that get you? What's the average home in Placerville look like? Well, that's gonna get you about 1,700 to 1,800 square feet, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms on an acre to an acre and a half, in reasonably good condition. Now that's what 535 gets you, and of course it goes up from there all the way to expensive luxury homes depending on your budget. But what if you can't afford $535,000? Does that mean there's nothing here for you? Well, of course not. The bottom of the market is around $325,000 to $350,000 if you need to get a loan on the property, if the property has to be in good enough condition for you to be able to get a loan on it. Now, occasionally between 300K and 325K, we do find a home or two that you can get a loan on, but they're exceptionally rare. So if you're on a tight budget, you're still gonna have to spend about $325,000 to $350,000 to get yourself a single family home in Placerville. Now, what do you get at that end of the market? You're gonna get something that's more of a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 900 to 1,200 square feet that needs a lot of updating and work. So anything under 500K is gonna need some updating. Anything under 400K is gonna need considerable updating and work. And anything under 300K is likely to be a full-on fixer-upper that requires a cash offer to get it done. Now, hopefully that gives you some brackets to put on your searches to make your online home searching in the Placerville area more fruitful and make more sense. Now, like anything, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. If you're seeing a home that is under $535,000 and is in great shape and is a big home on acreage, it might be in one of our very, very far-flung rural communities up here. You can get some houses that are below 535K that are in great shape and larger if you're willing to live 45 minutes to an hour drive off of the highway. So that is available to you, but if you see that online, go ahead and do a map search and look where that thing is and make sure you're willing to make that drive every time you got to go to town for milk and every time you got to take the kids to school. Hey, if you're thinking about moving here and you still aren't sure by the end of this video if Placerville is right for you, or you have more questions about what it costs to live here, feel free to reach out, send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email. I've been a realtor here for 19 years. I've helped hundreds of families just like yours, and I'm always happy to help. All right, property taxes. Now these can vary wildly depending on where you're coming from. It might be very different than what you're used to. So here, your base tax rate is 1%. Now there's always those special assessment taxes like $30 for the library and $100 for the schools and $50 for the ambulance, and those are gonna add up. So I recommend you ballpark your property taxes at 1.25% of the purchase price of your home. That'll give you a good ballpark that should include any special assessments that are there. Now, if you're doing this for the purposes of calculating your monthly loan payment, you simply multiply 0.0125 times the purchase price of your home and divide the result by 12, and that gives you the amount you're gonna add to your monthly mortgage payment for taxes. Now, of course, there are other things that can affect your property taxes, things like Mello-Roos taxes. Now, Mello-Roos are just a way for developers to pass on the cost of community development, things like sidewalks, sewers, and streetlights, on to the homeowners. They do that via a Mello-Roos tax. So this is something you experience in new building communities and communities even in the resale market that had those taxes when they're new. And we don't have a lot of that in Placerville. We have very little new building here, so it's not something you come across often. It's something you're more likely to come across at the edge of our county, at the county line in El Dorado Hills, where they've had a lot more new home communities built in the last few years. Now, when it comes to new construction, there's a lot to consider there. So much so that I'm gonna do an entire video on that for you. But suffice it to say, that if you're going new construction, you want to look at and wrap your mind around all of the fees involved. And that's something that as a professional realtor, I can help you evaluate. Some of these communities have not just Melrose taxes, but also HOA fees. Some of them have golf memberships, clubhouse fees, dining fees. Some of them, if they're 55 and over, even have a class and community event fee that you pay. And some of them even have a private transfer fee of 1% that you pay back to the HOA when you sell, which increases your cost of sale by 1%. These are important things to consider, so keep your eye out for that video coming soon on things to consider when buying new construction. Gas prices. So as you know, these vary wildly from place to place, and it can get a little heated when you talk about gas prices. You can almost measure our cultural stress level by what we're paying at the pump. Now, as you all know, what I'm quoting you now is only really good for the day I shot the video, but to give you an idea, as of now, January 2024, what I'm paying at the pump is between $4.09 a gallon and $4.35 a gallon, depending on where I go in Placerville. And I've lived here a long, long time, so I know where the cheap gas stations are to hit up. And I drive a Toyota Tundra. Toyota's known for their reliability, not so much for their good gas mileage. So every time I hit the pump, it hurts, so I pay pretty close attention to this. Now, if you're a fan of getting your cheap gas at Costco, our nearest Costco is all the way down in Folsom, about a 25-minute drive away. We go there frequently enough, though, that we hit up that gas station every time we go there. Next up is propane. Now, depending on the way your house is configured, you might be using propane to heat the home, to heat your water, and to cook with. Now, if you're coming from the city where you've got natural gas piped right to your house, the cost of propane might come as a shock. There's a lot to unpack with propane, and there's a lot of ways you can make it cheaper for yourself once you're here. So let's go through all of those so I can save you some money on your propane bills. Starting with, are you gonna own your tank or lease your tank? There's pros and cons to both. Now, owning your tank, the pros are you get to shop around and you can call and fill with whoever's got the cheapest rates at the time and save yourself a little money there. Now, how long it takes you to break even depends on how much you paid for the tank, how much you're saving on each fill, and how much propane you use. Your mileage may vary there. Now, the con of owning your own propane tank is that you have to leak check it, safety check it, and maintain the tank yourself. You also have to monitor it and make sure you get it filled before you run out and don't have any heat. Now, most people up here are running a 250-gallon above ground propane tank in their side yard or backyard. There are other options, but that's the most common. So if you're shopping around to figure out what it'll cost you to buy your own propane tank, start with that. Look at 250-gallon above ground tanks. Now, the other option is to lease your tank from an individual propane company. Now, this means you're stuck with working with just that company. So the con is that you have to pay whatever that company's charging for gas at the time of the fill. The pro is they leak check it, they safety check it, and they maintain it for you. And for that service, you pay about $75 a year. So it's a pretty great deal. This is the option that I've chosen for my family because it gives me one less thing to worry about and maintain on my home. Now, after that, you have to decide if you're gonna be an on-demand fill client or if you're gonna be on a regular top-off route. Now, on-demand simply means that you only get filled when you call them and ask them to come fill. If you're on a top-off route, they're gonna fill your tank when the gauge reads between 35 and 50%. The con to being on a top-off route, of course, is that there's 35 to 50% of the gas in your tank that you paid for that you never use. So when I first moved up here, I was on demand because I didn't want to have that gas in there that I paid for and wasn't using. The con, though, with being on demand is you have to pay attention to your tank and make sure you call them to fill it before it runs out, which happens frequently. And let me tell you, it only ever runs out on a snowy, stormy weekend day. So if that happens and you call, if you can even get a fill because of the weather or because it's a weekend, you're gonna pay emergency fill prices. 1 or 2 emergency fills over the course of the year is gonna completely wipe out any savings that you had by being an on-demand customer. So after a few years of messing that up several times and having a very angry, cold wife for a few weekends, I went ahead and switched to being on a normal top-off route. It's great. They monitor it for me. They come out, they top off the tank, they leave a bill at the door, and I never, ever, ever run out of propane. Now, my choice is to lease a tank and to be on a regular top-off route. Do they cost me a few extra bucks a year? Yes, they do. But for me, it's well worth it in the long run. You can choose your own adventure on this. Do be advised that propane costs more in the winter than in the summer. So just as summer's ending, make sure to get your tank topped off before you hit the winter rates. Now, to put it into perspective, I spend about $1,700 to $2,100 a year on propane, but this is not evenly distributed into an average monthly bill that you can count on. Most of that expenditure is going to be between November and March. So it's going to be bigger bills for part of the year and almost no bills during the summertime. Now, your mileage may vary, of course, depending on what you do at the thermostat. I don't mind being cold, so we have our thermostat set in the low 60s to mid 60s most of the winter. Now, I hate being hot, and we'll talk about that when it comes to the electricity prices. So my electric prices are high and my propane costs are lower because of the way I run my thermostat. Again, your mileage may vary. Hey, if you've made it this far and you're getting anything at all out of this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and check off all notifications so you don't miss another video with crucial information that could help you with your move to Placerville or El Dorado County. The electric bill. Now here our electricity is provided by PG&E. And I'm gonna be real honest with you, trying to figure out their rate structure and their tiers and everything else makes my head explode. So I don't get real granular with that part of the bill. What I can give you is a ballpark on what you might spend. So for us, in the winter time, when we're heating with propane, our PG&E bill is $80 to $100 a month. No big deal. Now, I mentioned before, I hate being hot, and it gets pretty hot here in the summers. So in the summertime, I run the air conditioning a fair bit. In June, will be about $300, July $500, and August $600, and then we'll start coming back down for us in September. Again, your mileage may vary depending on what you're doing at the thermostat. If you're willing to sweat a little bit more, your bills will be cheaper than mine. The thing to note here, though, is that PG&E relatively in the state of California is expensive power. So if you're used to a Southern California Edison rate, or even our neighbors to the west in Sacramento, if you're moving up the hill and you're used to SMUD rates, the cost of PG&E might blow your hair back a little bit. So familiarize yourself with it and plan accordingly. Let's talk water. Now, up here in the foothills, you're either going to be a little ways outside of town and be on your own well, in which case the water is free. You just have some costs in maintaining the pump and a little bit of electricity costs to run the pump. Or you're going to be in a town area where you're going to be on a public water district. Now, in general, we have 3 public water districts you might deal with: the El Dorado Irrigation District, the Georgetown Public Utilities District, and City of Placerville Water. Now, for this video, we're focusing on Placerville, so I'm just going to address the cost of City of Placerville water. Now, a little ways back, we had some ailing infrastructure that needed to be replaced. So over about a 4-year period, they raised our rates significantly on the water. So water isn't cheap here, at least not as cheap as it used to be. They bill you every 2 months, and for our family of 4, spending no water on irrigating the lawn, we average about $350 every 2 months on water. Now again, your mileage may vary, but if you're sensitive to water costs, then simply restrict your home search to properties that are outside of the town limits and that have their own residential well. All right, the last bill to talk about here is garbage. And your garbage service is going to be provided by El Dorado Disposal. It's a 3 roller can system, one with a black top for garbage, one with a yellow top for recycle, and one with a green top that serves 2 functions. It's your yard waste and your residential home compost. Now, you can pay for an extra can for any of those. You can get larger cans or smaller cans, and those are going to adjust your bill slightly, but on average it's billed every 2 months, and you're going to pay between $80 and $90 every 2 months for that service. Now, up here in the foothills, we still have some holdouts that buy their own cans, save up their garbage, and just make regular trips to the dump to dispose of their waste. You can choose your own adventure on that. For our family, we pay for the garbage service. All right, that wraps up our breakdown of the cost of living in Placerville. Now, if you're still not sure if Placerville is for you, or you have more questions about the cost of living here or anything at all about Placerville, feel free to reach out to me via the contact information on your screen. I've helped hundreds of families just like yours, and I'm always happy to help. But of course, the cost of living in Placerville doesn't matter at all if Placerville is not for you and your family. So to help you determine that, watch this video up here about the pros and cons of living in Placerville. And if you want even more information about what it's like to eat, sleep, work, play in Placerville, click this playlist right here and that'll cover all of it for you. Or maybe it's like this. You'll figure it out. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.